Thank you.
All right, we're live.
Okay, thank you, Caitlin. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Newburyport Historical Commission meeting for Thursday evening, the 11th of March, 2021. Another virtual meeting via Zoom. I'll start with a roll call of our commissioners. So Malcolm Conrath, is he here yet? Let's see. Oh, yep, I see his name. I'll give him another minute. I think he's just getting logged in now. So Mr. It's funny, Conrath and Sandra in the first two by alphabetical order, but I think they're a little bit delayed. Okay, Christopher Fay.
Here.
Okay, Peter McNamee.
Here.
Mr. Joe Morgan.
Here.
Okay, Patricia Pecknick.
Here.
Okay, and the chair is here. Now, Malcolm, I see you in the meeting, but it looks like your microphone is, pardon me, is muted. So,
can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thanks. And Mark,
Great.
excuse me, and I see Mark just joined. So Malcolm, when you're not speaking or anything, you can go ahead and use that mute to, so there's any extraneous noise or whatever. And Mark Centrone.
Hi, present.
Okay, and we hear you. Thank you. Okay, so all board members are present, and we have Caitlin Sullivan from the Planning Board and Gretchen Joyce taking notes. So the usual rules apply. Only the commissioners have their audio enabled. If there is I don't expect any public hearings tonight based on what I see in the agenda. So we don't have to worry about it. If we get to something that requires public comment, I'll go over the rules for that. But for now, I won't really worry about it other than to say that if you're on the telephone, and we do have something like that, in case you didn't already know it, *9 is what you use to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. And commissioners, include stating your name if you're making or seconding a motion for the benefit of the minute taker. Thanks, because we record that, and all the votes taken on these Zoom meetings are roll call votes. Pardon me. Okay, so we have three items that fall into the category of general business. The first one is a presentation by Bill Clary of the Energy Advisory Committee, and I guess which has a subcommittee, if I understand this correctly. So let's see, we see him in the attendees here.
I'm here, yes.
Oh, okay. And I see, and we hear you. So talking is permitted. So I don't really know too much about this. But I understand you're going to fill us in and also take any questions we might have. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead? The only thing I know is that you guys would love to have a member of our commission on your subcommittee to kind of coordinate and help communication back and forth and what have you. So why don't you go ahead, Bill?
Sounds great. Thank you, Malcolm. Greetings, everyone. I'm sorry I can't see you all. I'm not sure if I'm not quite set up, but anyway, greetings tonight. The quick, I've sent some information to Caitlin, which I think may have been sent along to everybody. But I've been a member of the Energy Advisory Committee for a few years now. In 2019, we undertook a project to try to understand greenhouse gas emissions from that are Newburyport as a city is creating. And we looked at all sorts of emission sources, emission sinks. This was conducted by Deb Shepard. And the net of all of it was that about a third of the emissions come from our electricity, a third come from buildings, and a third come from transportation, just rough numbers. So after getting that result and digesting it a little bit, we decided the Energy Advisory Committee is citizens appointed by the mayor of Newburyport to look at energy issues, similar to the Resiliency Committee and the Waste Task Force. And we decided to drop into three subcommittees to look at those three big buckets for greenhouse gas emissions. And I've been looking after the buildings. We started this back in about October of this year, really trying to figure out how do we get our arms around this, who are the key players, and then what are the programs involved in all of this. We've involved National Grid as part of this project to engage them they're participating and providing some data and input. We've engaged with the heating fuels group. We've engaged with the council and the city government. And then based on how many historic properties there are in Newburyport, we wanted to reach out to the Historic Commission to try to see if we could create a liaison, some sort of dialogue between the groups, because obviously anything we're trying to do, we need to be cognizant of a number of things to protect basically building values, but also to try to see if there's some way we can reduce energy consumption in the buildings while also transitioning to renewable energy. So the whole purpose of reaching out to this group was to introduce ourselves and try to start a dialogue between the groups.
Mhm.
And so I'd be happy to take comments, questions at this point.
Okay, so you your committee reports to the city council or consults with them when they on energy efficiency related stuff, and toward the goal of being does I think the city has a carbon neutral goal of some sort. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so we report to the mayor, not to the
Oh,
council.
okay. Thanks.
But we've been trying to get more of an interaction with the council because of the zoning issues that are
Right.
going to be coming up. So yeah, the city has adopted a non-binding, I think is probably the best way to put it, goal of trying to make the city, municipal offices, buildings, whatnot, carbon neutral by 2030, and the totality of Newburyport carbon neutral by 2050.
Okay. And it's interesting that, well, thank you for that, Bill, and I'm sure we will have a couple of questions for you. I just want to add something that Diane Boisvert in the planning office, pardon me, has done some research and created a map and so forth, because the Historical Commission is involved or wants to update our listing, which of historical structures, houses that are over 75 years old, houses that are historical or contributing to the historic district and so forth. That hasn't been updated in quite a while. And she sent out an email with some statistics that said that she said that there are 8,844 buildings, of which about 5,875 of those are buildings and 2,969 are outbuildings. But of that number, 4,605 are considered historic under our current ordinances. That's 75 years old or older, whereas 44,101 are under 75. So there's more houses older than 75 than younger in our city. So I thought that was really interesting. And I know we have this issue is going to be coming up more and more. In fact, it's not on our agenda tonight or yet for whenever, but I know that the Unitarian Church, the First Religious Society, has started talking to the planning office about something that they're interested in, which is the possibility of putting solar panels on the roof of the church. So I know solar panels on roofs is going to be a topic that we'll have to address as a commission to see what, try to see where the balance falls between being energy efficient, less carbon whatever, and lower emissions and so forth, and also without being too detrimental to the historic fabric.
Right. Yeah, I'm actually part of that group at the Unitarian Church.
Oh,
And
okay.
we probably have to re-roof the parish hall somewhere around within 5 years. They're already going to be doing, I believe, a portion of the roof, or just did a portion of the roof. So it seems like this is a good time to look into that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks. And so I think Caitlin told us that you would expect that this would be like one meeting per month for someone to attend with you guys?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, our last meeting, well, before I go into that, let me see if see if anyone here in the panel's got a hand up. I don't. Our last meeting, we talked about this. I know, Peter, you seemed interested. But so why don't I turn it over to you guys? Does anyone have a question or anything they'd like to know more about this, so that they can consider volunteering to be a representative? Um, I guess the only thing else I could ask or think of asking Bill is I can see it's easy to understand the communication role of exchanging information back and forth so the historical commission knows what you guys are up to and vice versa. Can you do you have any idea what kind of uh, advice you might be seeking from the historical commission from this representative? I think that might help us figure out, um, you know, whether we can, who might be willing to join you.
I can give a little bit of color on the question. The little bit we know about transitioning of many historic buildings to both reduce energy use and move to renewables is that it's difficult and expensive, and that improperly done, it satisfies absolutely nobody. We also know that the overall trend in the US is that people are looking to have more energy efficient buildings that they live in general, not specifically, but in general. We also know that if you have a double paned window, there's less noise that comes into a house than if you have a single pane window. And that if you reduce drafts in a house, then it improves it just feels more comfortable. We have heard a fairly large amount of data that would suggest that preserving and restoring old windows versus replacing windows is better from a number of standpoints, namely waste, and actually durability, which has been a surprising sort of insight. So
Yeah, we knew that.
right. So there's things we're learning. We've been participating with a few presentations that a couple regional groups have done that suggest a very cautious approach to thinking about these issues is probably the best way to proceed, so that the investment in a building and the results from the efforts are well done. I'll just kind of leave it that way. So the trouble we have is that our basic feeling is that this is a group that may be much better positioned to provide that kind of counsel and or dialogue back and forth than the current members we have on the group.
Okay. I thought of a question while you were talking there, Bill. Are you guys tied in with? I noticed you have National Grid people on the as members, and there's the Mass Save program, which helps homeowners, with low cost, low energy assessments, low cost energy improvements, and they have various programs that National Grid runs to try to make some fairly some things more affordable, whether it's weather stripping to reduce drafts, as you were talking about, and so on. So are you guys tied into that as well somehow?
Yeah, because of the National Grid tie-in, we actually have pretty good feeling on that. And we're actually working with the city to provide input to the state on the next round of effort underway for the Mass Save program.
Right.
One of the things we found is that the consultants that come out with Mass Save, they're basically people that are running a business.
Right.
And they all have a bias based on what they're selling.
Right.
Some of them are better than others. And it would be really valuable if it was a more comprehensive and less arguably biased assessment.
Yeah.
So that any homeowner winds up with a really good understanding of, what actions are feasible and possible with their home at a cost-effective basis.
Yeah.
So a great example of that is going back to the Unitarian Church, is we had an analysis done of, where the leaks, drafts, various other things are. and immediately ran into the knob and tube problem with wiring. Most of the wiring in the church had been updated a while ago, but as it turned out, not all of the knob and tube had been disconnected. So we had to disconnect some of the wiring before we could proceed with any sort of vapor barriers and other things to reduce some of the draftiness, if you will, of the walls, which all, of course, you have to make sure that you don't wind up causing a humidity or water migration problem, so you rot out beams and supports. So it really is, it's not a simple process, and every building, it seems like, is slightly different than the next one.
Yeah, yeah. Was before mass production of a lot of house parts with standardized windows and doors and all that stuff. I
Right.
know in a lot of our houses, if a room has 3 windows in the same room, they might not all be exactly the same size,
Right.
just as an example. Well, that all sounds pretty good, actually, and it'd be interesting, and the fact that we can kind of give feedback kind of back up the chain to both National Grid and maybe to the state, to maybe get creative as far as programs to um, assist with affordability or have tax credits or whatever. Plus, I really like your idea of getting better standardization on the evaluations, because from my own experience, I've with some of the contractors with Mass Savia, they are, let's just say, they're quite variable in their expertise and experience. Okay, any questions, fellow panelists here?
I do have a question. Bill, outside of this sort of the more informative relationship that you have with the Historical Commission,
Mark, can you speak up just a bit?
outside of the informative relationship that you might have between your group and the Historical Commission, I'm not sure I quite understand whether or not this would have an impact on the way the Historical Commission actually functions, because our role is a little different than actually sort of what you seem to propose in terms of offering solutions. So I'd like a little clarification on that from you.
So, Mark, it's a great question, and unfortunately, I can't answer it terribly well because I don't really fully appreciate what the role of the Historical Commission is within the context of the city, because I believe it is basically a city group. The specifics, what we're doing right now, the little bit I can offer you is a little bit of where we are right now. The overlap is probably pretty minimal, but to the extent that we start working on building codes and thinking about solutions and approaches and outreach to building owners, or especially historic building owners, that's where I think the overlap starts occurring, and where the Historic Commission could provide some really valuable feedback to us.
Yeah, I would just add, Bill, I mean, Mark, I don't see this Energy Committee really altering anything that the Historical Commission does or how we operate per se. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but I see this more as us being, or having a representative that's a kind of a resource to the Energy Subcommittees, so that to relay some of our knowledge and experience and expertise on old houses, old structures, the kinds of things that we run into and have encountered, and also some of our point of view with respect to historical preservation and that sort of thing. If hopefully that makes sense to both you guys. Does that make sense to you, Bill, too?
It makes sense a lot to me. There may be, in that especially, there may be more value to us having you on the board than to you having a relationship with us, because I think we do need that real guidance and input.
Okay, yep. And I do see a couple other hands up I want to get to. So Patricia, I know yours has been up for a little while. Do you want to say something?
I just wanted to say that energy efficiency is one of the hot topics in preservation. Well, maybe one of the cool topics in preservation right now, especially because there's so many young preservationists at the National Trust and on state historic commissions across the country. And there are so many ways to maintain the integrity of an historic property and be energy efficient at the same time. Of course, renewable energy and aesthetics, I think, were once thought of as mutually exclusive goals. But what I'm seeing people saying is that any aesthetic discord between things like solar panels and, you know, the historic roof will be resolved fairly soon by new technologies. Probably one way our commission could be helpful is that there's a National Park Service bulletin called Installing Solar Panels and Meeting the Secretary of the Interior Standards. I think conversations like that would probably be helpful to your organization. And then I just also wanted to say, Malcolm, if you get a chance to mute yourself when you're not speaking, I think there's maybe some noise coming from through your computer mic sometimes when you may not intend it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Patricia.
Thank you.
And Joe, did you also have a comment?
Yeah, thank you. So Bill said he wasn't really sure what we do. And I just wanted to give him just the really short answer on that. As the Historical Commission, we review applicants and their proposals for modifying their properties, either for additions. Sometimes they're as small as, I guess a dormer or modification to a roof line. Usually the two things that trigger our review is either an addition of a certain size where demolition of an exterior wall is required, or a roof line change. So what we're really looking at are historical preservation type issues relative to these proposed modifications to historical structures. And I'm really not understanding very clearly what you're looking for from us. The solar panel example, I guess, is probably the most salient one, but as long as you're not doing anything to alter an exterior and certainly not a historical exterior, then I don't really see where there's a crossover between what you do and what we do. Everything that is usually in terms of thermal envelope efficiency or weather tightness is invisible to us, or it should be. So that's all I have to say. I just don't really know how you want us to help you.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. And just comment on that. I guess, and this is just my personal take on this, that I think just having someone with the kind of perspective that people on this board have could just be, useful to the energy subcommittee folks, even if what a particular project might involve would not normally come before us for review or anything like that, So it's kind of like what Bill was saying about we may be more useful to them than the other way around. That's my own take on it. But let me get to Peter too. I know he had his hand up as well.
Thanks, Glenn. I'm not muted.
Yep.
Okay.
No, you're good.
Actually, I'm curious to hear Bill's response to Joe's comments.
Okay. Sure. I think Joe may have spoken directly to Mark's question. And to the extent that we're within the building envelope with any proposal we have, there may not really be any effect back on the historic commission. I was just trying to think about the only thing where anything we might consider proposing that would actually be, if you will, on the building envelope would be windows. And then if there was any either solar, electric, photovoltaics, or solar thermal panels that might be added to a roof or somewhere on the property. So those are about all I can really think of that would affect, if you will, the envelope of a building.
Mhm. Bill, I forgot to ask you, do you guys have a regular day of the week and time for your meetings?
We don't yet. We've been really in a very intensive information gathering mode to try to figure out how to build a coalition to kind of attack this problem. We're about at the point where we need to set a date, but we don't have one yet.
Okay.
If I may,
Yeah.
so back to Joe's questions. Joe, did Bill's responses answer your question, your comments?
Yeah, well, yes, I don't, I do, I think that's an acknowledgement that there's very little that we can really help them with. We can be there, well, I just don't really understand what we can bring to their discussions about the modalities of insulating or you know, or tightening up existing envelopes. I mean, old buildings are old buildings, and the formulas are pretty much universal. I think Chair Richards mentioned Mass Save. Mass Save will pretty much, you go to their website, you see pretty much all of the different variables that are available for old buildings. It's true that, I mean, my building's 20 years old, but I had Mass Save come out and they tightened it up and they added some insulation. And it's true, private contractors will bring their own solutions and you don't have necessarily access to the full range, but all of these solutions are invisible. They don't impact any of the exterior qualities or characteristics of buildings, and they shouldn't. They should be invisible. So I don't see how that intersects with what we do as a historical preservation specialist, if you will, to verify and to enforce adherence to local architectural preservation requirements.
Okay.
Bill, if I could, so you don't have a regular meeting schedule at this point. Can you give us an example of what initiatives, succinctly, what initiatives are currently uppermost on your list, or what action items are uppermost on the list for your committee?
So I think what we're trying to do is figure out kind of where the low-hanging fruit is right now to try to start building some momentum. So right now, meeting we just had with a group called, what was it, Select. They can do and finance photovoltaic installations on fairly large applications. So we're going to start looking at the industrial park for some solar energy installations, as well as talk to the city about solar canopies and some parking lots. So that's kind of one of the things. The another thing we're doing is we're trying to get an energy scorecard put together that we'll publish annually, looking at the consumption of energy in Newburyport and how much is renewable on an annual basis. After that, it gets kind of murky because we still haven't really figured out how we're going to start driving changes in the historic buildings in Newburyport in a responsible way while protecting property values, which is kind of the primary things we need to make sure we do. We're educated just enough to know that if we do it the wrong way, we can make a lot of people unhappy. And what we need to do is kind of cross the threshold and figure out how we actually drive change and protect values and keep people happy.
Right. Are you all set, Peter? I notice your hand is still up.
Oops, I'm sorry. I'll take my hand down for now.
All right,
Making no
well,
promises.
just to wrap this up, it sounds like part of the problem here is, if it's even not really a problem, but that things are just ramping up and getting started, so there are a lot of unknowns. You don't have a regular date and time for your meeting? Do you have you set a date for whenever your next meeting is yet, Bill?
No, we were just actually waiting for this meeting we just had today.
Oh, okay.
I think we've decided that we're not going to have regular members from the city council.
Right.
We are going to update a couple people quarterly, and then they can take it back to the council. And then it would ramp up if there was any specific zoning issues. So I think we've touched on the key kind of players we think we need to have touched on. With this being the last kind of conversation we were trying to have, to try to figure out who the players are for the regular meetings and then establish some sort of regular meeting schedule.
Okay. Well, if no one else is interested, if you could let me know. You could do it through Caitlin. I know you've got her email and everything. When that meeting is, I'm happy to attend, just to see, because I think that's the best way to answer some of these questions about if there's any, if this makes sense, and how best to work that out. But something just occurred to me. It seems that a lot of what you're looking for, since it doesn't relate strictly to our legal role in mission, but it's more about kind of historical knowledge or knowledge of historical structures and so on. Have you tried to contact anyone with the Preservation Trust?
We haven't, and that was actually one of the things I was hoping would come out of this, is if this isn't the right group, who might be the right group, so that we get the feedback.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I would definitely recommend that. We can get you there. Well, do you have their website? And by the way, I'm getting a really annoying echo here. Is it just me? That's getting that echo.
I hear it, but I think it's on your side, Glenn.
Huh. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, do you have their contact information, Bill?
I'm sure I can find stuff on the web, but if you had a name or anybody I should focus on, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, don't have it in front of me right now. Why don't we have either myself or Caitlin can zap you over an email with a link to their website and some contact information and some of the names of the folks on there.
That'd be great, and I really appreciate it. I hope I answered people's questions as much as I could, but if there's anything that comes out, please send them along.
Okay, and before you go, I do see that a member of the trust is an attendee, Stephanie Niketish. Stephanie, would you be willing to make any comment on this particular thing? If so, we can enable your audio.
Oh, thank you, Chairman Richards. Yes, so this is a big area in historic preservation, and there is a lot to be contributed by historic preservationists. I'm not sure, I think it's, thank you for recommending the Preservation Trust be contacted instead of the Historical Commission. But I do think someone from the Historical Commission should be in this group. And the Preservation Trust will always be willing to help where it can. But are you trying to just push this off on us? Because it's a big area, and
no, I'm not. In fact, my statement about attending the next meeting still holds.
Can I suggest that Bill turns off his audio? It may be echoing through there.
Yeah, I think it was because it. Thanks, Peter. Is that why you had your hand up?
No, I've got, I like your suggestion about attending one of their meetings, Glenn, and I was going to raise my hand for that. I think it would be better if two of us did, so I'd be happy
Okay.
to join you with that too.
All right, that'd be great. That'd be great. So Bill, just let us. You can do it through Caitlin. Just let her know when the next meeting gets scheduled, and she will let us know.
Chairman Richards?
Yes.
And may I just make another comment, which I think that Commissioner Pecknick also spoke to. There are preservation organizations, including the National Park Service and also our own Historic New England, who have loads of information, useful information on energy efficiency and historic buildings. So that's just a whole other area that, I mean, I will send you links if Commissioner Pecknick hasn't already done it, but it just.
Yeah, yes, I do. Yes, thank you so much. And I do believe that last summer, when I was talking to folks in the commission about the conference I attended, I had sent to Andy Port the National Trust for Historic Preservation Green Energy Guidebook. I believe it's on our website, the Historical Commission's website. But yeah, there's nothing but materials, conferences. This is again, it's a really hot topic, and I actually appreciate having the conversation because the Secretary standards matter to us with mechanicals or dormers or skylights or anything on a rooftop. And it would be terrible if somebody said, oh, I just put these giant panels on that don't match the color of the roof and they have the wrong profile. And I mean, there's a house where this has already happened in town. So it's great to have a conversation so that people know what is expected of them, that they would have to come before the commission. So I appreciate Mr. Cleary
There's
coming.
also a resource on our website, the historic windows, the energy retrofits for historic windows. It was borrowed from Cambridge, as I recall, but it's a really detailed document that's available for review. And I believe, like I said, I believe it's in our archive on the Historical Commission's website.
Yeah, we can. I was thinking we can forward a lot of those links to Bill so he can share them with his subcommittee. And thank you, Peter, for stepping forward. That's great. So I think that's about all we need to do on this, unless anyone has any final questions or comments. Patricia, your hand is up. Did you have anything, or was that okay? Okay, and thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate you being willing to be put on the spot there.
Great, Glenn. Thanks, and thanks to everyone for hearing me out.
Okay.
Hope you have a good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. Okay. Next item was about, or is, I should say, about 93 State Street. This isn't so much a discussion as a kind of an update. This proposal or the project will be at the planning board meeting next week. I believe it's next Wednesday, and they have recently submitted some new plans. The plans are very similar to the ones we reviewed a couple weeks back, with some changes that reflect some of the questions they got from the planning board and a couple of comments from us. Like I think, Joe, you made some comments about finishes and window treatments and that sort of thing. And I noticed that was one of the areas that they added some detail. I don't know if anyone has had a chance to look at that, but that is, if you want to check it out, it's on the planning board's agenda page. It's not on our agenda to review it, and we have not been asked by either the applicant or the planning board to do a review of it. But I just thought I'd let you know that's there for you to take a look at. And if anyone wants to see how the planning board discussion goes, that is next Wednesday. Director Port was in receipt of a letter by a resident, and it was also one of the board members, Rick Tainter, had brought up an idea that never took off. And in the materials that the applicant has posted for the planning board meeting seems to have been soundly rejected, and that's the idea of building something that's up on State Street rather than the back of the lot. And I just wanted to mention that because I know a couple of you, I think, I'm not sure if it was Chris or Joe, someone mentioned that as far as the location of a commercial building, that might make more sense. So I just wanted to put it out there to see if any of you had any, comment on that you wanted to make before we just drop that subject. And I do see two hands. And I know Peter, you've been recusing yourself from all these discussions. Is that why your hand is up?
That is why my hand is up. I'm going to recuse myself yet again.
Okay, thanks
So
very
now
much.
I put my hand down and keep my mouth shut.
Okay, thank you very much. Joe, I see your hand is up. Did you want to make a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair Richards. I actually have 3 points I'd like to make. This is a topic that has been of interest to me for a while, but I've had to keep my mouth shut on it. But lo and behold, here you are inviting me to talk. So I'm definitely going to take advantage of the situation here.
Well, okay.
So I got 3 points that I'd like to make regarding the IFS, because we've been working on this for quite a while. And I don't want to say that our situation is stalemate right now, but clearly, I think that there's been a lot. I believe there's a lot of the stakeholders who don't feel that the process has delivered the best result. And I'm actually one of those. I'm not a stakeholder other than a citizen here in the city, but I do feel that opportunities have been missed. And the first thing I'd like to say is that in terms of the problem statement itself, I think we've had that somewhat wrong. We've been reacting consistently to the applicant's problem statement, which is really how do we respond to the historical 1870 building. And I just want to remind people that there are a lot of historical buildings around the applicant's site. So I want to remind people that we are making, that they are proposing an addition to an historical site, but they are not technically making an addition to an historical building. And I would just point out that the Secretary of the Interior's Interior guidelines actually distinguish between additions and between new construction. And if you go to their document, on page 156, they talk about new additions as part of rehabilitation. And then on page 161, they talk about related new construction, which is site-related work. And I would say that's what we have here, is we have a new construction. We have new construction on an historical site within an historical district. And we should not lose sight of the fact that what we have to do, I think, is to make sure that any new construction in the DOD, the overlay district, which is an adjunct district to the actual baseline zoning of this area, that it is looking at any building relative to its context. And the context here is not just the 1870s building, it is all of the DOD and all of its historical buildings. So that's my preface to my second point, is regarding the State Street proposal, which has not, of course, been proposed yet. I think that this, moving the proposed new construction to State Street solves a lot of problems, and it might even be a win-win situation. It may be a consensus solution. It certainly takes the burden off of the neighborhood, and there's no further discussion with the neighborhood, really, the residential neighborhood, assuming that they maintain their parking lot, which is what they prefer. But the bank, I think, wins because they get a building that actually could be a very handsome building, and it's adjacent to their historical structure, and it could actually be a formal addition to the historical structure, as long as it adheres to the the guidelines. And the guidelines actually are addressing this very exact same situation, as how to develop, how to make an addition to an historic structure in an urban setting and in a Main Street setting. I think that this is a great opportunity for the bank to really enhance their image and their visibility. It's an opportunity for them to engage with the city and to become again that partner that they keep talking about, the city's partner in its concern over the heritage, its streetscape. This is an opportunity for them to step up and make a contribution on Main Street, where we're seeing actually a lot of shuttered storefronts. This is something that they could be, their project could be a stimulus, if you will, for the historic center of town. And this brings me to my third point, which I'd like to really emphasize because I feel very strongly about it, is this solution on State Street actually would involve the city as a stakeholder. I don't feel the city has had a strong voice in this yet. It hasn't stated what it wants to see. And when I say the city, I also mean the citizens of Newburyport. There hasn't been a strong voice for saying, well, what should the city expect from one of its leading partners here, a historically leading partner? What should we think of them as a civic player here on Main Street? Where should they be, and what should we get out of it as the city of Newburyport? And I think this is an opportunity for the city also to be a winning stakeholder. And I feel that having not seen a solution yet really robs the entire city of the potential for a very nice project, something that contributes and makes everyone happy. So thank you very much.
Okay, well, thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. Any other member of the board have a comment? Sounds like you'd been thinking about that. You've put a lot of thought into that, Joe, so I appreciate it. And if you could hear it or not, but I was furiously typing away so I could capture the gist of what you were saying. Okay, not seeing any hands, so going once, going twice, no other comment. Okay, well then we'll leave that there, and thank Joe for his very pertinent comments on that. Now let's see, we do have one last item for tonight. It's in reference to an application for CPA funds. That's the Community Preservation Act funds. Let's see if Mr. Highland is here and the attendees. Yep, he is. So Jay Highland is here. Jay, when you can unmute yourself in just a sec. We've unmuted you from our end, so you can speak to us about your proposal. I don't know how many on the board here, the Historical Commission, have seen this. This is the Shipbuilding Memorial application, and I'm going to let Jay explain it. But and I know hopefully you've seen both some of those renderings and information, also some of the critique and other information that was provided by some of our other local historians and people with an interest in this. So I don't want, without me saying anything more, why don't I turn over to James excuse me, Jay. It's Jay or James?
It's both. It's James, but I go by Jay.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Jay.
And
okay.
Also, if you wouldn't mind, Glenn, if you could also include, I think is standing by, Michael Corropian, who is the sculptor that we've been working with. Is he, do you see him? Can he be unmuted as well?
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. I can't see myself, but I'm unmuted, I believe.
Yep, Caitlin, our very capable moderator, has already taken care of it.
Great.
I see the design, kind of the rough sketch that Mike did. He actually has a much better scale model that he's created, a 3-dimensional model of the same rendering. Yes, there's one image right
Yeah,
there.
you go down a couple more, you'll see the full thing. Yeah, there you go. Good.
Yeah, so we, Mike and I have been working together. Of course, I'm Jay Highland. I'm with the Lighthouse Preservation Society, and we run the local romantic dining program at the top of the Newburyport rear range light. And with some of the funds that we've made from those dinners, we had wanted to do something in Newburyport, since it's the birthplace of the Coast Guard, and it kind of matches some of our mission, actually, because we're the Lighthouse Preservation Society. And we wanted to somehow do something more substantial in terms of a memorial to the birthplace of the U.S. Coast Guard. And we kind of got into this in a backhanded way. Initially, we did do a statue, and we submitted it to the CPA fund last year, which featured the 3 greatest heroes of the 3 old federal agencies that merged to become the modern Coast Guard. And those were the Revenue Cutter Service, the U.S. Lighthouse Service, and the U.S. Life Saving Service. And that was a beautiful rendering that Mike did of these 3 individuals that the Coast Guard Historian's Office agreed were, and also the curator at the Coast Guard Museum in New London agreed were probably the 3 most significant people in terms of the greatest heroes of those 3 agencies. But there was an objection. There was an objection that they weren't from Newburyport, so we lost our chance of funding in the last round for CPA. So I was told by the mayor's office and the planning director for the city that we should try to find somebody who was local. So I did my research, and I discovered that a gentleman named Donald McKay is buried in Newburyport, and he's considered to be probably the greatest of all shipbuilders, American shipbuilders of all time. And he designed and kind of invented the clipper ships, which were probably the epitome of sailing vessels even to this day. And they have set a number of world records that have never been broken, even now. And so he got a start in Newburyport and built his first clipper ships here, and then moved down to Boston, where he made some of his more famous ships, which were like the Flying Cloud and Sovereign of the Seas, and numerous other ships that were, the pride of the American fleet, and made America, the greatest seagoing nation in the world. So he is actually buried in Newburyport, as well as he worked here for about 4 years before moving down to Boston. So it occurred to me that really the 2 major claims to fame that Newburyport has are all connected to the shipbuilding industry that used to be here and during the 1800s. So that heritage is kind of gone by the wayside because it's no longer with us, and so I'm afraid that it's being lost. And for instance, I've lived or worked in Newburyport for about 25 years now, and I have never heard an explanation as to why Newburyport's considered to be Clipper City, or why there's a sports team, with the high school called the Clippers. And I've never actually, it's always puzzled me until I started to do this research on McKay, that, this is the reason why Newburyport, has got that designation, and why the Clipper ships were so important in the old days to Newburyport. I think that's being lost, and I think we need to do something about it. And that's why we've come up with this memorial. And it's, it's a concept piece, what we've done so far. And, we can subtract or expand on it, whatever, and we're willing to work with people like yourselves and other historians in the community to develop it more fully. But we want it to be not just a work of art, but also an educational experience. So Michael Corropian, our artist and sculptor, has put some little, you see some kind of brass plaques there underneath the ships. That just is kind of representation of the fact that we want to have a lot of written text there, historic text, and also we're thinking about really old photos of the old shipyards and such, which were magnificent. And they were putting out some amazing ships at that time during the 1800s. So I should introduce Mike because he probably has some things to say about this. But Michael Corropian, we've been working with him now for several years. He, for any of the sports lovers out there, he did the huge tigers that surround Tiger Stadium in Detroit for the Detroit baseball team. And Mike, if you're there now, why don't you jump in and tell them a little bit more about this this concept that you've come up with us.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, good to meet you all. I can't see you, obviously, but it's Jay and I, like he said, our idea is to create an educational theme to this. That it seems that, as Jay had mentioned, there's very little knowledge there. I mean, I'm sure there's historians, and you guys probably know about the Clipper ships, but I wonder how much the kids in school are being taught about it. And there's nothing like three-dimensional education. In other words, they see a statue of somebody, they're going to walk towards it, they're going to go over and touch it, they're going to look at what's there, and then they're going to start to learn about their history, their town, their city. You know, that's a shame that there's a lot of cities. My hometown of Manchester, Connecticut, is chose to do 3 figures of from history, and I think a number of other, with a lot of statues coming down, there should be statues going up. And I think there's respectable historical people that deserve to be commemorated. And our concept here again is initial. It's just kind of our concepts coming together, and just to put something in 3 dimensions to show people. We can adjust it. Obviously, we're open to some suggestions as well. But our hope was that we could move forward with something like this, even if it's just the figure itself. And even if we don't have a location for it, that with the year or 2 it's going to take to produce just the figure, that we might be able to find a location for it. The waterfront, I think, was our first idea, and I think it's a great place for it. But you and the council and the committee there, you may have some other suggestions. We would love to get your feedback on it. Have you, anybody thought about some kind of sculptural concept that would be both inspiring and educational? You know, I think that we have to teach history. It's not always taught in schools. So I love it because I can merge my sculptural work into a historical, and with my interest in history, I'm sorry. And it's great to be able to research a subject like this. I didn't know who McKay was 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Was that Jay wanting?
Yeah, I can say a little bit more. I think one of the things that inspired me to kind of go in this direction and to hire Mike to work with us on this is that several years ago, we restored we're the Lighthouse Preservation Society. So we restored the 10-Pound Island Lighthouse in Gloucester Harbor and got that relit. And at the end of that completion of our work there, the city allowed us to put a small memorial near the fisherman statue, the man at the wheel. And so we put a little historical plaque and a little lighthouse, bronze lighthouse there and such on a granite rock, and told the story about, you know, the history of 10-Pound Island Lighthouse. But in considering that location and such, and looking at the statue that was, you know, really has become the icon for Gloucester, I mean, it occurred to me what a magnificent way to kind of capture a city's history and heritage and their pride in their community. And of course, you know, in the case of Gloucester, the fishing industry is still very much alive. It's not that way for the shipbuilding industry in Newburyport. And it's my concern that that's going to be lost unless we do something like this to commemorate it and for all time. And so that not only our own children, you know, growing up can, you know, understand the history and read about the educational aspects of this memorial, but also see this great work of art that kind of encapsulates and inspires and allows people to see a really great work of art that kind of captures the essence of the history of Newburyport. And the fact is, it's the shipbuilding industry, which is the core of both our claims to fame as both the birthplace of the Coast Guard and the birthplace of the clipper ships. It's the shipbuilding industry that that really is responsible for those two designations, and which are really something to be very proud of for our community. And so I wanted to capture, in some sense, like Gloucester has done with the Fisherman Statue, I wanted to capture something like that for Newburyport and the shipbuilding industry with the McKay statue.
Okay, and you have an application with the CPC for this year, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, a couple of quick things, and I assume you would like the Historical Commission to lend its support to your application. Is that
Yes.
the idea? Okay. While this doesn't call for a public hearing, I noticed there are some folks in attendance in the attendee list that have expressed interest in this topic. So if you are an attendee and would like to make a public comment, I will permit that. If you do use the facility to raise your hand so we know that you want to do that. And while we're waiting to see if anyone does anyone on the board have a comment, question? And I do see, okay, Patricia, I saw your hand go up, and we do have an attendee as well. So
Attendees, yeah, thank
you want me to take the attendee first, Patricia?
Yeah, please.
Okay. All right. Looks like Glee Woodworth. I know Glee is a local historian. I'm sure she's probably seen I've seen McKay's grave in, was it Oak Hill Cemetery, I think. And it's like a little obelisk there. So Glee, did you want to make a comment?
A couple things. Thank you. A couple concerns about Mr. Highland's application. One is my concern is from the beginning is the process. And I understand that the waterfront has been wrestling over who owns what piece and so forth. That has finally kind of ended, and now we're all set. And the Waterfront Trust has obviously has a stake in this, and the process needs to go through, I think, the Waterfront Trust. We also have Sawaki, the design company that's going to take a big picture of the waterfront and take an overall design of this. And we need to wait for this. And I know the city is supportive of a shipbuilding celebration memorial, whatever we want to call that. But it's been held up a bit because of what's been going on for many, many years on the waterfront. So we've finally, that's all set. For those of you who aren't familiar with my background, I've done about 180 presentations, slideshows, tours, etc. since 2006, and I've written a couple books, and then Clipper Heritage Trail. So I'm very familiar, and I've always been, along with other historians, promoting shipbuilding history. So here's a couple things we are concerned is that the Clipper ships, they have been involved in this world since before 1800 over in France. Then there were the Baltimore Clippers in the 1830s. And yes, Donald McKay, as a young man, came to Newburyport from 1840 to 44. And the shipbuilders who were established here, they gave him the chance. This is a young kid. And yes, he did some excellent building, but he did not invent the clipper ship. Okay, that was already established. And you've got all the experts to say, what exactly is a clipper ship? Well, you got the medium clipper ships, you got the fast clipper ships, you got the half clipper ships. Okay, we don't need to get into that. Yes, he was an excellent builder of ships, but he was here for less than 4 years. And then he went to East Boston. Why is he buried here in Newburyport? Because in 1842, he arrived in 40 with his wife and at least one child. And that child, Anne Jane, died in 1842. So what did they do? They bought a plot in Oak Hill Cemetery. It is possible that they lost 1 or 2 more infants. There are also 3 other infants at that gravesite. And then they moved to Boston, and it's just for practical reasons. The first wife dies, Albania. So where does she get buried? Did she request to come to Newburyport? And so that's where she was buried. And so that's why Donald McKay is buried here. Okay, he loved Newburyport. And so there's just, and we do want a shipbuilding celebration down there. But I think it's a disservice when we have John Currier Jr. and other shipbuilders who spent most of their life or all of their life here contributing to the economy with their families, involved in other aspects of the community. And, we need to remember John Currier Jr., who built 100 ships. We also need to bring in and remember the Woodwell family down in Joppa, who built 150 schooners. Currier and Townsend. Yes, they built the Dreadnought, which was a true clipper ship. And then the Jackman family, who built 60 and probably the most variety of the ships. So yes, but I believe we need to wait and make sure the process is played out, see what that big design is, then get all the stakeholders in. I spoke to Wilbur Shank of the Waterfront Trust. Yes, they are supportive of this, but we need to wait. But I do not think Donald McKay, who was here just less than 4 years, be highlighted. Lots of folks need to be highlighted. And so that's my basic concerns. Yes, a shipbuilding celebration on the waterfront, but let's let the process play out and let the 3 institutions and others who are interested, the Custom House, Library Archives, Museum of Old Newbury, and people who are interested, get together with the Waterfront Trust and the city folks, and let's come up with, so we can celebrate 150 years of our shipbuilding history. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Woodworth. Appreciate that. Making out here 150 years, not just 4. Excuse me, and I will say that this, as with I think some of my peers on the board here, this application has caused us to hit the books and the Wikipedias and whatever to check out what we did or didn't know about both McKay and the clipper ships and whatever. You can, if you can, Glee, try to put your hand down again. That'd be fine. Patricia, did you want to make a comment now? I don't see anyone else in the attendee list wanting to speak.
I have a lot to say, but I'd like Christopher Fay to go first, and I'll follow him.
You want a bad cleanup? Okay.
Are you sure? Because you had your hand up first.
I have. It's going to be a long. I have a lot. Please go ahead.
I might steal your thunder. Yeah, so I looked at this today and I read the little biography, and my first thought was, this dude only lived here for 4 years. He's born in Canada. He comes here. And then I was thinking to myself, well, don't be that guy. I don't know who this person is, but it seemed odd to me that he wasn't a native Newburyporter, and that the Coast Guard thing, we have statues. We've got a stone marker down near the sort of park there. And so I said, I'm not going to be that guy. And then I read the letters and that were written, and Glee's follow up to that. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm not going to be that guy. Maybe that point is going to be made. So that would be one point. And I think I've known Glee for a few years now, and she is an asset to the city. And she knows her stuff, and her family's been here for, I don't know how many hundreds of years. So I always, when I think about Newburyport, I think about me being a recent arrival, only 25 years here, compared to the hundreds of years that other families have been here, and they know their history a little bit better than me. The second thing I would say is I appreciate the sentiment behind, if we build a statue, the kids will come. But I think that as a teacher, as a history teacher, I don't know if we teach in Newburyport to the little ones the clipper ships. I have to imagine that we do. I do know that when my kids were young, they went on constant walking Wednesdays or walking Tuesdays to visit various places around the city, and I appreciate the possibility of that. So, but I'm also concerned that, you know, the idea that we may not be teachers. I think we probably are. The third thing I would like to say is this, because the comment that was made about statues coming down sort of jogged this in my thought. And I don't know anything about this guy. And I guess I'm hesitant to put right now, given the current climate politically and socially, to maybe without extensive research into somebody's life, anybody's life, that we start to build statues to people that we may find out later on weren't such savory characters. And you know, I'm a big proponent of, you know, you can build a statue, it's a piece of art, but if it represents something, because at one particular point in history, people thought it's okay to build statues to Confederates, for example, or slave owners. We do have a very notable statue of a slave owner in Newburyport, and I don't want to get into those weeds. However, I know that some things have been taken down in the city, and I don't want to necessarily go into all the negative stuff, but the city is complicit. I think we can recognize that in sort of trading somehow, some way in products, at least from the islands. And I don't know, I'm just hesitant about doing something like that. I guess the fourth thing I would say real quick is, do we need to crowd the waterfront with statues and artifacts and things like that as well? So thank you. I'll turn it over to Patricia.
Thank you, Chris. And that I hadn't thought of that political climate issue. That's an interesting, because it is true that some of these ships were used. I think most of them, a lot of them were used in the China trade, but I know that there were ships built here. I'm pretty sure that there were ships built here that were used in the so-called triangle trade and slave trade. So yeah, there is some not so nice history there as well. Go ahead, Patricia.
Yeah, my fellow commissioners already know me as that guy. So, you know, McKay has been more than adequately memorialized already as an important figure in Boston maritime history. There's a Donald McKay Elementary School. There's a half-ton bronze bust of him in East Boston. There's an obelisk on Castle Island. And I used to live very close to his house and shipyard in East Boston. So when I saw this application, I wanted to check my memory of his career against the historical record. And after looking at the academic sources, in my view, the commission must not only not support it, but actually must object to this project. And I don't say that lightly. It would negatively impact the public understanding of the role that McKay played in Newburyport's maritime economy. He was clearly a bird of passage, not a native son, as has been pointed out by previous speakers. And he was, for a short time here, part of a larger cohort of innovators and collaborators, including members of the Merrill family. And then he quickly moved on to greener pastures, bluer oceans, I guess. To check my facts, I consulted a wonderfully researched book of clipper ship scholarship by maritime historian Stephen Ujifusa that came out just in 2018. It's called Barons of the Sea and the Race to Build the World's Fastest Clipper Ship. It's fascinating. It's about the dynasties that built and owned these ships. He's a Harvard-trained historian, historic preservationist, and he is NPR's go-to guy for maritime history. It's a very engaging book, and there's a whole chapter on Donald McKay. And he describes McKay's brief and restless years in Newburyport at a time when the city was in economic decline, and McKay knew that it was too small for his ambitions. that Newburyport was the stepping stone he needed on his way to fame and fortune elsewhere. And as other speakers have said, this author too says Donald Mackay, East Boston shipbuilder, did not originate the clipper ship, but was the man who made it the most famous. I then checked this author's facts and analysis against those in Mackay's descendant, Richard Mackay's biography of Donald Mackay. And even Mackay's descendant insists that it was, if any one inventor could be named, it was the New York shipbuilder, John Griffiths, who was working from a model of the Baltimore ships. If a single inventor there must be, okay? And that Mackay was his disciple in the shipyards of New York. And he was long gone from there onto Maine and Newburyport by the time Griffith designed what may be called the first clipper ship. That Mackay arrived in Newburyport for a few years and, couldn't wait to hightail it out of town. In 1850, he's getting his national, renown, but really spent the rest of his life in Boston. And as was mentioned, back to Newburyport, where the stepping stone, becomes the headstone. And so that's the first ground on which I object to a statue of Mackay on the waterfront. It's not coherent with his history. I don't think it's reflective of the city's history. And now I will say a little more than necessary, because I want to get this into the public record, especially since Lee Woodworth was talking about what might happen on the waterfront. And this will echo some of what Christopher Fay said. The old school classic sort of great man statue is very much out of step with the direction in which public history has been moving really since the 90s. And I think it's also out of step with our city's culture of public art. There are a lot of abstract or conceptual sculptures on the waterfront, on the rail trail. They appropriately point to our industrial and commercial history, but they promote the contemporary use of the waterfront as a site of play, of imagination, of wonder. These sculptures are very inviting, very dynamic compared to the statue of a single man. One of the things that's really cool about the fact that the rail trail leads right to the waterfront is that in the mid-19th century, you had this steam versus sail rivalry. And behind the Newburyport Art Association, some of the sculptures sort of participate in that. It's that sense of play that makes our waterfront really special, I think. And so maybe the best way to honor our city's architectural history is not to allow the waterfront to become a formal space with all these museum installations and interpretive signage, but to let it be a park with, light and open space that won't upstage or try to upstage the Custom House and Market Square. And I really understand the passion and the sincerity that motivates this project about Mackay. But as Mr. Fay said, memorials are a very tricky thing. We've sort of passed out of the era when we're expressing our historical ideals or values or even events in the form of monuments. Most people, most cities are moving toward telling stories more democratically, saying, here's an inventor, here's an innovator, here's an investor. It's like if we tried to put up a monument to the pandemic in 100 years and we took one scientist at Johnson & Johnson and built a statue, whereas everybody in the mid-19th century was working on speed and roots. And so there's a whole plurality of pieces. And finally, to agree with what Mr. Fay said, young people in Newburyport especially are going to demand that if we tell the story of the clipper ships on the waterfront, we have to tell the whole story. And Donald Mackay did create cotton ships to carry cotton from the slave states of Mississippi and Alabama right up the coast to New England markets, and to carry cotton from Florida to Liverpool, England. And it was Mackay who took, according to the excellent book I read, the flat-floored China tea trade clipper and enlarged it so it could haul these vast amounts of cotton from Savannah to Boston. His brother was in fact a captain on those ships. That's what William Lloyd Garrison was ranting about in the streets of Newburyport and Boston. And the social reformers of the 19th century were very upset that the clipper ships were being used to smuggle opium. And so, in fact, the whole story is much more complex and more interesting than the image of one man. And if the story is worth telling, I hope we'll tell it right. And I'm going to hold out for something like that.
Okay. Thanks, Patricia. And as usual, your exhaustive research is really, really helpful and useful. So thank you for,
Yeah, but
for that.
everyone else got there without reading that book or
That's
nautical journals. So,
Well,
maybe I'm doing things. Joe has his hand up.
okay. Yep. I see it. Okay. Mr. Morgan, the floor is yours.
Yeah, this is a fascinating discussion, and I really admire and appreciate everyone's passion for this, both the applicant here and our own commissioners. I do believe whatever that history is, it's complicated, and it needs the right backdrop. And it just makes me think that the Maritime Museum, the Custom House, is a great place. There must be some place for this exhibit and all of its complexities and nuances in that museum. Not to mention that it's a great venue for educational venue. It can be seen in context, a much greater context. Wanted to just. I don't want to really talk about this. I mean, I think Mr. Fay and Ms. Becknick have done that very well and brought up many nuances here. But I did want to ask us as the commissioners what we really are, what our task is here. We know 2 weeks ago we had discussions about the Bartlett Mall and proposals for modifications to the existing frog pond. I am a little bit confused as to how we participate as a historical commission in these proposals from the Community Preservation Act, or from the commission for its approvals for CPA funds. And it seems to me that we as a commission should be somehow attaching this back to our role as preservationists and looking at preservation aspects of these projects. And I think that we were just reminded by that by Mr. Fay and Ms. Pecknick that the historical settings for these things are of what is really of paramount importance to us as commissioners, historical commissioners. We need to understand how they fit. We need to do our fact checking. Clearly, that's very important. But we have to be very careful about the historical landscapes that they are being proposed in. And so I think process, looking at the overall site designs and landscape designs, and going just as the lady in the audience proposed, is that the process really needs to be respected. We need to understand how, I mean, this can float anywhere, apparently, according to the application. It can go anywhere, it's universal, but it's not really. It's going to go in a specific geographical location, and it needs to fit in that context as a, both architecturally and I think historically. So I believe the process really needs to be respected, and we as the commissioners need to understand how it fits in to the larger design for this waterfront park. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm coming back to sort of fundamentalist questions here about what our role is. We know what it is relative to the built environment for, buildings, but what is our preservationist approach for landscapes and for this type of project? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And if sort of interpreting a little bit of that last bit of what you were saying there, that it does harken back to Ms. Woodworth's comments from that she was in the attendee, that about the process, and that as you're saying, we need to know more about basically more specifics, about where this would be, what it's going to finally look like, and how it would fit in or not fit in, and so on, which are really unknown at this point because the city is just now beginning its planning process for the park overall. So it's not at all clear where exactly this would even go at this point. So I think people have pretty much said everything that I had on my mind. The only thing I could add that maybe wasn't touched on except very lightly is that the timing of this does seem a bit out of order, which I guess is really the process issue that people have been mentioning. And of course, and the nature of the actual information. I think there's needs to be some work done on that. Now, to your question, Joe, about our role as a historical commission in light of these, CPC applications and so on, what I'll just say is that we don't have any official role in that. We do have a representative from the Historical Commission on the CPC, happens to be me this year, but there's no special authority to that. My understanding, and I think this is correct, that when applications have a particular historic nature to them or involve a preservation aspect of something, then the applicant will often come to the Historical Commission to have us take a look at it and see if we agree that it's a good idea. It forms it's a good part of the overall historic preservation goals of the city and so forth, and the commission, and we would be willing to lend our informal support. It's merely all it is an email, frankly, to the CPC saying that for example, the Cushing House Museum, because of the unique nature of that place, its cultural history, its public educational benefits, and all of that, we saw some real benefits to supporting the application to help them do that work. So that's the kind of thing, but it's strictly informal, it's unofficial, but I have no idea how much weight the CPC gives to those, but I suppose it's like any application. If you have letters of recommendation, it's always helpful. All right, hopefully that kind of helps clear up some of that for you.
Say one more
Yes,
thing.
that's very helpful. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Patricia.
I just want to say in our page, the Historical Commission page, it says the mission of our commission is to protect, preserve, and promote Newburyport's historic structures, neighborhoods, and landscapes. And even though it's usually structures, neighborhoods and landscapes, that's the three things, right? And so as Mr. Morgan pointed out, we were looking at the mall and the landscape of the mall, and I think this is part of the preservation of the landscape of the waterfront.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I suppose I could, normally we take a vote to see if we're going to support this. I have a feeling which way that might go, but I shouldn't try to predict the future here. Does anyone on the board even feel they can propose a motion to lend our support to this? And not seeing or hearing anything.
I would like to make a motion to not lend our support to this. In other words,
you can if you want.
Must it be expressed in the positive? I make a motion to support it and then there's a vote?
Typically that's the way it would work. Yeah. Typically motions are expressed in a positive thing. So the way that just so everyone's really clear on this, if someone, let's say Patricia makes a motion that we support it, but you don't support it, just vote no, because it is, I'm not sure if it's required or not, but it is customary and usual to have a motion be to put something forward. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there's any bias in that direction. It just means that's the way the the grammar is constructed. That's all it means.
Okay, then I'll make a motion. that
Can I
we-
just interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
Yeah.
Ask another question? Glenn, could I make a motion to simply take a vote? Not to support it or not support it, but simply to take a vote and have some due process.
Well, what would the vote would have to be for something? What would we be voting on?
Well, I'm thinking, take a vote or call it I don't know. I would call it a vote. Because I'm wondering if somebody makes a motion in support of something and then votes against it.
Oh, that's done all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough,
Yeah.
though.
I know it is. I grant it. It is. It seems a bit odd, a little weird, but yeah, it's just the way they do it.
Okay.
Given that, is there a second?
So
I
make-
just had a question.
Okay.
I just, I think these guys have come up with some ideas and I think they're interesting. I think I'd rather not vote yes or no on this. I'd like to see them maybe alter their plans. I mean, I think maybe some kind of memorial to the clipper ship Dreadnought made the fastest passage from New York to Liverpool in the 1840s and was a captain from Newburyport. Samuel Samuelson was just a incredible mariner. I think I just hate to squash these guys if we don't need to, and I'd like to see them maybe dig a little deeper and come up with some other ideas. The other thing is down by where Cashman Park goes over to the North End Boat Club, looks like a perfect circle. This reminds me of this thing. I walk my dog down there all the time. And it's a totally underutilized space with a granite circle there. So I just, that's it. I just, I would like to encourage these guys rather than slam the book on them if we can.
Okay, well, judging from Mr. Hyland's passion, I don't think that's going to happen. But Peter, I see your hand up. Did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I appreciate what Malcolm's saying. I think there's a lot to that. By the same token, I don't think that an up or down vote on this proposal necessarily will stop them. So I think that the motion that's been made should carry through, and I think Mark Sendrin seconded it.
Oh, I didn't hear that. Is that correct, Mark?
That is correct.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for some reason your audio is really low. That's why. Well, thanks for Peter for correcting that. And what Peter said is absolutely correct. This is not going to. We're not voting on the application per se. That's for a job for the CPC coming up. So I'll probably run into that again as a representative there. But and I think Jay's passion for this will certainly not allow it to die altogether. And I think that he's even said in his presentation that he understands that this idea is probably going to need some refinement, some tweaking, and so forth. And I think that's certainly is the case. I think we pretty much all agree on that. Now, Patricia, well, Peter, your hand is still up, and Patricia's hand is up. Did you have something that needs to be said before this vote, or is that just? Oh, they suddenly went down.
Well, no, I did just want to add on to it. I appreciate what they're proposing. I appreciate the idea behind it. I'm a Coast Guard veteran, and I would love to see a proper memorial or monument to the Coast Guard in the city. So I'm totally behind something, but this is not necessarily it.
Okay. All right. Well, there is a motion on the floor. It's been seconded, so we should take that vote. So let me quickly do that. So a no vote means that you do not support the particular, or you actually all it really means is that the commission, aka me will not, send a letter or email saying that we support it. That's all it means. So if you don't think we should do that at this point, may come back in the future after revision and so forth. But if you don't support that right now, then that would be a no vote. If you do think we should do that, that would be a yes vote. So I'll go around the horn here, alphabetical order. Malcolm Carnwath.
Oh, I'm on the fence. I don't know what to say now.
All right. Well, you think about it while I continue around.
Sure.
Sendrin.
Nope.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Fay.
No.
Okay. Mr. McNamee.
No.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Morgan.
No.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Pecknick.
No.
Okay. Yeah. And the chair is also nay. Does that help you decide, Malcolm? Or you could even abstain if you want. You don't have to take a position if you're not sure.
Yeah, I'll abstain. I'd like to encourage these guys, even though I don't think they're going down the right path right now.
Okay, and that's fine.
It's like looking at a plan for the house. Do you know what I mean? You approve that plan or you don't approve that plan, they're going to come back with another plan. They're going to come back with another plan. It's not in the end.
Oh yeah, I'm sure this will, and I hope that and in fact I'd forgotten about that circle. I think was it Malcolm mentioned it, that out by, because I live right near Cashman Park as well. I know very well that spot you're talking about, and yeah, it's like that's almost as that might be a really good spot. It's near a boatyard. It's near a lot of docks there. It's not right on the river, but it's not. Wouldn't be sort of cluttering up right downtown, so to speak. Not that it's clutter. Sorry, I shouldn't have used that word, but whatever. So I'm sure this won't be going away. Joe, did you have want to say something?
Yes, thanks. I just have a process question here.
Yep.
I don't really understand how we've gotten this far with a proposal. I mean, this, a piece of sculpture like this is a very public object, especially when occurring in a major park. Is there no, what is the process? What's the formal process for actually commissioning something like this? Is there no requirement for a competition so that we can see a competition of ideas and the public can be involved in that? I don't quite know how we got this far.
Well, yeah, I'm not in a good position to answer that, other than to say that Jay Highland has come up, and maybe some others, I don't know who else was involved, came up with this idea. They've been working on iterations of this. They've been to the Community Preservation Committee before, and this is kind of a revised version of that. Jay, I don't know. Basically, as far as what the actual process is by which the city would erect any sculpture, I'm sure the Parks Department would be involved, and possibly the planning office would be involved. I think all I can say is, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Andy, and I apologize. I couldn't have been here earlier.
Yep.
I could actually speak to this point if it might be helpful.
Sure. Yeah, it would be, I think.
So yeah, sorry, I missed some of the earlier discussion. I was coming from another meeting, but this is a prominent location, so there's clearly going to be elements like this in the park in some way. I don't know that we know the details of that, just yet, and we'd like to effort some of that in the coming months. Even though the coming months are devoted to the schematic design of the park, meaning it's more horizontal layout, and but it's also going to have some of the 3D elements of that, including topography and so forth. And so as part of that, there'll obviously be discussion of what sort of markers or indicators might be in there, aside from walkways or grass or sitting areas, things like that. It is a process that requires a little bit of public input. There was an ad hoc committee devoted to oversight of the park expansion project, the design process for that. I think that's a good forum for this to be reviewed through, as well as, frankly, because there is still more of a story to tell on the central waterfront. And I think this proposal, whether it's the right one or not, does suggest the importance of telling a better story on Newburyport's waterfront, more of the story than we currently tell out there. We have an opportunity to do that in the bigger park space. So I think we need a little bit more time to get, it sounds like from tonight's discussion, some details down as to what that message should be, and what are the messages we should be sending about either Newburyport's maritime history, the history of the park, land, and so forth. But there is a process for that. I think that there will be either some sort of process where there are proposals that come in, or the design team working with the committee will work for some sort of a local effort to come up with ideas like this and bring forward the right ones for the park. But I think that needs to be integrated into that design process, which will be unfolding before that waterfront ad hoc committee in the coming months when they meet with the design team. So there is a forum for that sort of thing. In the past, features of this nature have been done on a little bit more of an ad hoc way. But certainly on the central waterfront and some of the more prominent parks, there's been a more formalized process. And I think that the Historic Commission could definitely help out in this process, as can some of the other commenters tonight, and those who submitted this proposal, to weigh in on what is the right message to be sending, what is the history and the story to tell there. But because the Historic Commission has an expertise in that area, it seemed to make sense that the Historic Commission weigh in on this. And as it was noted earlier this evening, Glenn is a representative of the Historic Commission that acts as liaison to the Community Preservation Committee. And the Community Preservation Committee is the one that recommends to the City Council as a body, their advisory. They recommend to the City Council to approve funds. When they recommend approval of funds, then the City Council decides the final action of appropriation of those funds for use. So there's different stakeholders involved in this whole process, but I think we should all kind of stay in tune and work together to have appropriate elements like this, wherever that may be, in the park. When we have the right details as to what spaces we have appropriate, for that sort of thing, what sizes are available. It doesn't need to be designed in a different way to integrate well in the park. We'll have a little bit more information in, say, 6 months from now than we do right now. But I think the Historic Commission has a great role here in, if it's interested in acting as more advisory to the historic elements and the, say, interpretive panels. We would run by the Historic Commission, for instance, and say, well, can the Historic Commission weigh in on the accuracy of this information and how it's being displayed? Do we have the right emphasis? Do we have any better images to use for illustrating the concept? So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Andy. That is helpful. Did you hear the vote that was just taken?
I did that. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Andy. So, and hopefully, Joe, that helps answer your inquiry. And I see that Christopher has a hand up. Did you want to say something else, Chris?
Yeah, I just real quick, I was thinking about what some other people said, and Andy probably touched upon it in terms of design, but I would just going to make a suggestion. Now I feel like I need to say it, that maybe something that's more representative of the actual shipbuilders, as opposed to the designers of the ships, the people, the little people, the forgotten people, that would be far more democratic. That would include the real history of who built those ships. Might be more appropriate. That's all. Thanks for letting me get that off my chest.
Amen. Amen to that.
We actually have a concept for that, and we didn't show it to you. It's basically several figures, nobody in particular.
Yeah.
Sawing part of we could send you some pictures for another time if Jay wants to do that. But that was another concept. It's nobody in particular. It's just a generic, figures doing something. There's some abstraction in it, being the hull of the ship is part of it. And anyway.
That sounds interesting.
I didn't personally know a lot about McKay. I know he wasn't there very long. My question would be to the committee, and I'm glad, thank you for all the research you've done and the reading. It's obvious that, it could be a concern because of the cotton ships and all what the ships were used for. People are reading into statues now, like, with a magnifying glass. And what I do is figurative artwork. It's not dead, it's still alive. And I have towns that are doing my work, but I don't want to defend myself. I think you could look at my website and see that. But I think that I would like to ask, and I've asked my hometown this too, is there somebody in particular through history that you would commemorate in Newburyport? I mean, maybe not just one person. Obviously, Courier was there, but I'd just be open to ask you that.
Gee, the only answer I can think of would be kind of along the lines of what Chris just said, that we would probably lean towards something that somehow celebrated the activity rather than, a particular person or even a small group of people. You know what I mean?
Right. There is no one person like Abe Lincoln or somebody like that you could depict fairly. And, because there were a whole group of people that worked in the industry.
Yeah, quite a few, actually. Yeah.
I think that in some ways we have monuments to the shipbuilders, the sea captains. We have those homes. I don't anticipate those going anywhere anytime soon. But I always look at Newburyport as a working city. I think, as Patricia very astutely said, from sail to steam to factory work, it doesn't have to be the great man or the great moment necessarily to convey what the city, means, because I think we have some of that. But I don't know. I would love the Tigers, by the way, at Tiger Stadium are awesome. So I was struck by you did those, because those are fantastic. But like I said before, something that's more democratic, something that's inclusive of the role that the waterfront played, even beyond the shipbuilding, I don't, this is how, as a history teacher, this is how we teach history now. And this is how I've taught for 28 years, that it's a large tapestry. It includes, all sorts of people, and not just three white guys sawing boards, So.
Yeah. By the way, as a one of the things I'd love to see explained somehow is, as a sometimes sailor, I know what the mouth of the Merrimack is like in a sailing ship, especially before they had even any internal engines to rely on. I'd love to know how they maneuvered those big ships in and out of that mouth of the river, the way it's configured and the way the currents run and all that. But that's a whole nother story. Okay.
Yeah. I was just going to say to the sculptor that one of the interesting characters of Newburyport was George Whitfield, who he's called the forgotten founding father. He was the one who said, he was a preacher who went to Oxford with the Wesley brothers. And he also started the University of Pennsylvania with Ben Franklin, and he also found the funding for Princeton. But at a time when there was the Great Awakening of Christianity in the 18th century, he was the one who told the Patriots that they shouldn't worry because God was on their side, because the English were taking them to the cleaners, trying to force them to pay for the French and Indian War. And he's buried in Old South Church, and Old South was the largest wood frame building in the colonies in the 18th century.
Old South Church in Newburyport?
Yeah, on Federal Street.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. You must be reading your emails from the the historical mass historical, whoever it is. I get those two, and I know because I know George Whitfield was recently featured in one of those.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He was quite a character. He came over. He made 13 crossings in the 18th century. He went back to England several times. He founded Bethesda, which was the first orphanage in Savannah, because when the Savannah was a debtor's colony, and they came over here, and the parents would get sick and die, and there were more urchins on the street, so he started an orphanage. He was a very incredible guy. He made something like 18,000 or 36,000 sermons during his lifetime, and kind of in the 18th century, God was a rich man's game, because you had to be able to read God's word. was kind of
unless you had a
interesting guy.
unless you had a preacher, which is why they,
I should speak
preachers
up
made their
here.
reputations on their sermons. Anyway,
I should mention that I've been working as part of my doctoral studies in history. I've been working on trying to get the Whitfield statue brought to Newburyport and hopefully placed in the new park. It used to be the tennis courts.
Yeah.
Across from the church. And where we got to at this point is that the University of Pennsylvania, we thought initially that we were going to have to copy the statue, and actually Mike Corropian was going to help us with that. He's very capable in doing copies of statues as well. But as it's turned out, because of the recent outcry of some of the more radical students on campus, apparently it became known that that at Bethesda Orphanage, which I've been to actually in Savannah, Georgia, they used slaves there to help take care of the children, all those orphans. So first orphanage in America that Whitfield started. And as well as, I might add, he helped to found over 50 colleges and universities on both sides of the Atlantic. A great proponent of education. And he's considered to be the greatest orator that Great Britain ever produced. And he's also been called the great apostle of the English Empire. And he's buried in Newburyport. But the University of Pennsylvania has a beautiful statue of him. And because the students have kind of caught on about with the Black Lives Matter, that there was some slave activity associated with Whitfield, they threatened to topple it. So the university has offered it, has taken it off of campus into storage and has offered it to Newburyport.
Wow.
At no cost. But I think because of the controversy, and frankly, if people really knew their history, there wouldn't be any real question about the legitimacy of and the properness of having Whitfield put in Newburyport, because he started the Black churches. And if anybody's seen the new television series on the Black church on National Public Television, you'll see that those churches got started under his ministry with the Great Awakening in the 1700s.
Wow.
And also the abolition movement got started in England prior to the United States abolition movement with his disciples over there in England, and Wilberforce in particular, and John Newton, who wrote Amazing Grace, were key instruments in getting passage for the very first abolition movement, which actually spread to America in the Second Great Awakening in the early 1800s. And that, of course, brought on the American Civil War.
Okay. Well, as as chair, I should kind of reel this in, so to speak. And it's a fascinating discussion as it is. We've kind of drifted off a bit. I think the only other things on our agenda, the first thing is we do need to approve the minutes from our last meeting. Is someone willing to propose a motion to do so? Yes, yes. I saw Christopher make a gesture.
Chris Fay, I propose that we accept the minutes from last meeting.
Okay, motion, is there a second?
I'll second that. This is Joe.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Okay, so Malcolm, are you?
Yes.
Okay, you're a yes. Mark Sandrone?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I heard you that time. Christopher Fay?
Yes.
Okay, Peter? Back to me. Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Pecknick?
Yes.
Okay. And I'll join you in assenting to that. So we'll approve those minutes for Gretchen. And that only leaves the idea of adjournment, if such a thing could be conceived. Is there anyone who feels that?
So moved.
Thank you, Malcolm. Malcolm has moved that a motion to adjourn. Is it seconded?
Second, Peter.
Why? Thank you, Peter. Why is it on the motion to approve the minutes and adjourn? I don't have any trouble pulling motions out of you guys. It's for everything else. Okay,
Take what
Malcolm,
you
your
can get,
vote.
Glenn.
What's that?
Take what you can get.
Okay, Malcolm, your vote on adjournment.
Yes.
Okay. Wait a minute. Was that Malcolm or it sounded like Joe?
It was Malcolm.
Oh, okay. Yep. Now it's Malcolm. Mark Syndrome.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chris Fay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Peter McNamee.
Yes.
Okay, Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Pecknick.
Yes.
Thank you, and I'll approve that as well. And that will officially end tonight's meeting. I thank you all for attending, both the board members and the attendees who all joined. And on that, wish you all a good night and stay safe, and hopefully, if you haven't already been, getting a vaccination soon. So good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you very
Good night,
much.
all.
Good night.
Good night.